From the outside, everyone thought Maureen Calloway had finally won at life, because that was the story her boyfriend Lucas Myers insisted on selling to the world. He made sure his hand rested possessively on her waist in every photo, smiled wide and bright whenever someone asked about their future, and repeated the same sickening line about how he got lucky meeting the love of his life at a time when he least deserved her. Maureen believed him, because she wanted that story to be true more than she wanted her own instincts to be right. She had spent years picking up the pieces of her life after losing her mother, rebuilding herself with the fragile determination of someone who knew heartbreak too intimately. So when Lucas arrived with soft words, gentle attention, and a stability she had never experienced before, she let herself trust it. Trust him. She ignored the faint shiver in her chest that appeared whenever he complimented her just a little too loudly in public or reminded her how far she'd come thanks to him. She dismissed the subtle tension in his jaw each time she asked one too many questions about his late nights at work, assuming it was her fear talking, not reality. After all, Lucas worked at a mid-sized financial firm, and long hours were part of the job. At least that was what he claimed, always pointing to his firm's ridiculous expectations and never-ending deadlines as the reason he stumbled home sometime between midnight and 2. He smelled like expensive cologne instead of exhaustion, but she convinced herself that maybe he reapplied after leaving the office. Maybe he liked smelling fresh. Maybe she was paranoid. Yet something strange began when Lucas kept mentioning his accountant, a woman named Sierra Lowell, almost daily. He spoke of her as if she were some invisible guardian managing every minor detail of his financial life. According to him, Sierra was the only reason his job was tolerable at all. Organized, brilliant, impossible to replace. His lifesaver, his right hand, the only person who understood how demanding the field really was. Maureen found it odd because most people didn't gush about accountants the way Lucas did, but she reminded herself that she had no idea how finance worked. Maybe he genuinely appreciated the support. Maybe Sierra really was that important. The tipping point came quietly. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind that smelled like rain and car exhaust, and Maureen had picked up Lucas's favorite takeout to surprise him. She walked into his apartment using her key, humming softly to herself, ready to play the role of the supportive girlfriend. But the air felt wrong, too still, too heavy. Lucas had always been meticulous about his living room pillows, perfectly ranged, remote placed at the far end of the coffee table, blanket folded with surgical precision. That evening, the blanket was thrown over the arm of the couch like it had been yanked off someone's legs in a hurry. The pillows were dented. A wineglass sat on the table with a faint lipstick imprint that wasn't hers. She picked it up, staring at the shape of the mark, a curved signature of someone else's mouth mocking her. Her chest tightened, but she didn't want to jump to conclusions. She called his name, her voice trembling despite her attempts to steady it. No answer. She moved toward the hallway and noticed something else: perfume, a scent she didn't own. It smelled like sugared citrus and warm amber, too vibrant to be hers. Panic simmered under her skin as she approached the bedroom door. It was closed. Lucas never closed it unless he wasn't alone. She froze, her breath snagging in her throat, every instinct screaming at her that she was about to unravel the truth she had been running from. She reached for the doorknob just as Lucas's voice spilled through the door, low and intimate. She only caught fragments: a soft laugh, the rustle of sheets, a whisper, "Sierra, stop." She might. Then silence. A different silence this time, the kind that acknowledged her existence on the other side. Her pulse hammered so loudly she thought they must hear it. She stumbled backward, shaking, her hands numb, the takeout bag dropping to the floor with a soft thud. She nearly ran out of the apartment, her breath shallow, her vision blurred. She didn't remember driving home. She didn't remember unlocking her own door. She only remembered collapsing onto her couch with the kind of dread that hollowed her out from the inside. Over the next few days, Lucas acted like nothing was wrong, texting her sweet messages, complaining about work stress, asking when she wanted to have dinner again. Maureen couldn't bring herself to confront him yet. She needed to see the truth clearly before she accused him of anything. She needed something undeniable, something that would make him incapable of twisting the narrative, because she knew Lucas was the kind of man who could weaponize guilt like it was a second language. So she started observing carefully, noticing patterns, watching inconsistencies, and the more she looked, the more cracks appeared in his perfect facade. The late nights increased. His phone faced down constantly. The cologne changed. He became more possessive in public and more distant in private, oscillating between affection and coldness like he couldn't decide which mask to wear. One evening, when Lucas fell asleep on her couch, his phone buzzed with a message from a contact saved as S. Maren didn't want to look. She shouldn't have looked, but she did. And the message shattered the last thread holding her together. Miss you already. Next time let her find out for real. Maybe it'll push you to choose. Sierra. She closed her eyes, taking slow breaths, steadying herself through the pain. Lucas hadn't just cheated. He had built a double life, a performance, a manipulation so deliberate it made her skin crawl. But what Maren didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning. Lucas wasn't just lying about Sierra. He was lying about everything. Maren spent the next morning sitting on the edge of her bed with Lucas's phone message echoing in her mind like static she couldn't shut off. And although her hands trembled, there was no more room left for denial. The pieces were aligning with brutal clarity, exposing a reality she had subconsciously sensed from the beginning. But she wasn't ready to confront him yet. Not without a plan. Not without understanding just how deep his lies went. She needed to know who Lucas truly was, not the charming, dependable facade he paraded around, but the man behind the manipulation, behind the devotion he performed so convincingly that even she, someone who prided herself on reading people, had fallen for it. The more she dug for answers, the more she uncovered a pattern she had been too blind to see. It started with checking the financial app she'd helped him set up months earlier because he kept forgetting passwords. She still had access. He had forgotten that. Or maybe he never expected her to look. Transaction after transaction revealed dinners for two at upscale restaurants she had never been to, expensive jewelry purchases not meant for her, and hotel bookings suspiciously placed on nights he claimed to be working late. One booking, in particular, caught her attention: a weekend at an oceanfront hotel 3 hours away. She remembered that weekend clearly because he had told her he was flying out for a conference. He even faked airport background noise during their calls. Now she realized he had just held up his phone near a YouTube video while Sierra laughed beside him in a room overlooking the water. The truth pressed down on her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. Lucas hadn't occasionally cheated, he had orchestrated an entire second life. For at least 6 months, maybe longer. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was strategic, calculated, methodical. Everything he said to her now carried a second meaning she could painfully interpret. And yet, as she scrolled deeper through his financial records, something even stranger stood out. Unusually large transfers, marked as cash reimbursements, all go into a private account she didn't recognize. Thousands of dollars at a time, nearly every other week. Too structured to be personal spending, too consistent to be accidental, and all linked to Sierra through matching timestamps with calendar appointments. A chilling thought crept into her mind: maybe Sierra wasn't just the mistress. Maybe the entire accountant story wasn't a coincidence. Maybe their relationship wasn't driven purely by lust. Maybe they were doing something together, something that required secrecy, something that required money moving quietly. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the possibility that Lucas was cheating or the possibility that he was involved in something worse. She needed confirmation, but instead of confronting Lucas directly, she did something she never thought she would do: she followed him. She waited until Friday, the day he always claimed to have mandatory late-night meetings, and parked her car 2 blocks from his office. At 9:47 p.m., Lucas exited the building wearing a different shirt than he had arrived in, a detail that might have seemed minor if Maren hadn't already seen the matching purchase in his bank history. Earlier that day, he walked briskly, checking over his shoulder with an alertness she had never seen before. Not guilt paranoia. He got into his car and drove, taking back roads instead of the highway. Maren followed at a distance, her heart pounding so loudly she could feel it in her throat. After nearly 30 minutes of silence, Lucas pulled into the parking lot of a small, discreet building that looked like a private office space. Only one light was on inside. She watched him enter through a side door, and not even 2 minutes later, Sierra appeared in the window, drawing the blinds closed after letting him in. Maren's fingers tightened around the steering wheel until her knuckles paled. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply absorbed the confirmation of what she already knew deep inside. The relationship wasn't accidental. They were coordinated, together, and not just romantically. Still, she didn't move. Something told her to wait, to watch. Around midnight, Lucas and Sierra exited the building holding a brown envelope between them as if it were something precious. Lucas tucked it inside his jacket, and Sierra kissed him slow, confident, territorial. A kiss of someone who wasn't hiding, someone who believed she had already won. Lucas whispered something to her that made Sierra laugh, and Maureen recognized the sound instantly. It was the same laugh she had heard through Lucas's bedroom door the night everything splintered. Suddenly, Sierra pulled back, her expression turning serious, gripping Lucas's arm as she said something that made his posture stiffen. He nodded tightly. They parted ways shortly after, Lucas driving off while Sierra returned inside. Maureen didn't leave. Instead, she pulled out her phone and snapped photos: his car, the building address, the late-night meeting, the envelope. She didn't know what the envelope contained, but she knew one thing with clarity: she didn't expect Lucas wasn't just lying to her. He was hiding something big, something dangerous, something Sierra wanted from him, something he was willing to risk everything to keep secret. And for the first time in weeks, Maureen felt a faint spark inside her. Not devastation, not fear, not heartbreak, but anger. Steady, sharp, focused anger. Lucas thought she would crumble. He thought she would plead, beg, or break. He thought she would remain the fragile version of herself he had carefully molded. He had no idea she had already begun pulling every thread of his web apart. But she was about to find out something even more shocking: she wasn't the only person he had lied to. And soon, she would learn just how far Lucas's betrayal reached. Maureen woke the next morning with the kind of clarity that didn't feel like courage but survival, a cold steadiness that anchored her actions. As she began piecing together Lucas's lies with a precision she hadn't known she possessed, she no longer cared about salvaging the relationship or understanding why he had cheated. She cared about exposing whatever scheme he and Sierra were constructing behind their polished smiles and late-night meetings. She returned to the office building from the night before, this time in daylight, driving past slowly to avoid drawing attention. The structure looked unremarkable, a two-story brick complex with a faded sign indicating it held a mixture of medical and consulting offices. But the suite numbers she had seen lit up belonged to a business she had never heard Lucas mention: a private financial planning and consulting firm called Silverline Strategies. A quick search brought up almost nothing. No website, no reviews, just a business registration tied to a shell corporation. The pit in her stomach deepened. She wrote everything down: names, dates, locations, hours. If Lucas was involved in something shady, she was going to uncover every layer of it. But the real break in the narrative came when she decided to talk to someone who knew Lucas far longer than she had: his coworker, Jonah Priestley. Jonah was the only person Lucas ever referred to positively at work, calling him the one sane person in the building, which, in hindsight, should have been the first sign that Jonah probably sensed more than he let on. Maureen found him during his lunch break, leaning against a bench near a sandwich shop, scrolling on his phone. She hadn't planned what to say. She simply walked up to him and asked if they could talk privately. Jonah looked at her, face pale, tense, exhausted, and nodded as if he had been expecting this conversation for months. They moved behind the building, out of sight, and before she could say anything, Jonah sighed heavily and told her he had always wondered how long it would take for her to realize Lucas wasn't what he appeared. His voice was careful, cautious, almost apologetic as he revealed that Sierra wasn't Lucas's accountant. She wasn't even affiliated with the firm. In fact, no one at the firm knew who she was. Jonah explained that Lucas had a reputation at work for being suspiciously slippery with deadlines and overly protective of his assignments, often working on projects he claimed were confidential, and somehow always convincing upper management to give him access to records he didn't need. Jonah admitted there were whispers about him funneling information somewhere outside the company, but that no one had proof. Hearing this made Maureen's stomach twist, because she had already found those bank transfers, already connected Sierra to the late-night meetings. The envelope from the night before gained new weight in her mind. Something was moving between Lucas and Sierra: documents, numbers, accounts, something worth hiding. But Jonah wasn't finished. He told her Lucas had once been investigated internally for possible misconduct, but managed to shift blame onto another employee who was ultimately fired. That detail made Marin's blood run cold, because she realized then what Lucas was truly capable of. If he could destroy someone's career to save himself, then lying to her, manipulating her, and cheating on her were just the surface-level offenses. Underneath was someone far darker. When Jonah finally walked away, apologizing for not saying more sooner, Maren stood frozen until the cold air stung her lungs. She felt like she had been dating a stranger, someone who crafted narratives with surgical precision, someone who built trust only to exploit it. She returned to her car and sat quietly as she processed the pieces. Lucas wasn't just cheating. He was stealing, or leaking, or moving money, and Sierra was in the center of it. The next step became obvious. Maren drove to Lucas's apartment while he was at work, using her key to enter. She didn't come for confrontation. She came for evidence. Every drawer she opened felt like trespassing into a version of Lucas he never intended her to see. She found the wine glass from the night Sierra had been there, still unwashed in the sink, a mocking reminder of their arrogance. She searched his desk next, sifting through invoices, printouts, and receipts. Most seemed ordinary until she found a locked metal box tucked beneath a stack of unrelated paperwork. She didn't have a key, but she had curiosity sharpened into resolve. After several failed attempts, she pried it open using a flathead screwdriver from his junk drawer. Inside were two items, a prepaid phone and a thick stack of papers clipped together. The papers held dense spreadsheets and account numbers she didn't recognize, but the names connected everything: offshore accounts, payment schedules, withdrawal patterns, and at the top, the joint signature of Lucas Myers and Sierra Lowell. It wasn't just cheating, it was financial crime, coordinated, ongoing, and growing. The prepaid phone held only 3 text threads, each encrypted with a third-party app. One was Sierra, the other 2 were unfamiliar numbers discussing transfers, deadlines, and codes. Maren snapped photos of everything, every sheet, every message, every number. Her hands shook, but not from fear, from fury. Lucas had built an entire empire of secrets while convincing her she was lucky to have him. A man who had looked into her grieving eyes months earlier and told her he would always protect her had been using her stability as a cover for his deceit. She locked the apartment behind her and walked down the hallway with the quiet realization that she had crossed an invisible threshold. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was an uninformed. She now had evidence. And Lucas had no idea. That night, Lucas called her as usual with his smooth voice and casual confidence, rambling about being swamped with deadlines, unaware that Maren was listening to him speak while staring at the proof of his crime spread across her bed. She didn't challenge him. She didn't accuse him. She let him talk, let him lie, let him weave his performance, word by word, thinking she still believed it. But deep inside, she knew something he didn't. She knew she wasn't the only person he was lying to. And soon, Lucas's entire world, his lies, his schemes, his carefully maintained image would begin to fall apart. Not because fate decided it, but because Maren was going to pull the thread herself. Maren didn't sleep that night. Not because she was afraid, but because every piece of information she had gathered formed a map with gaps she needed to fill before taking the next step. She knew Lucas was laundering something: money, data, maybe both, and that Sierra was more than a mistress. She was a partner, but the documents in the metal box hinted at more players, more movement, more urgency than she had initially expected. She spent the early morning hours cross-referencing dates and tracing unfamiliar account numbers through public databases. Every thread led somewhere suspicious, but one detail stood out: an upcoming transfer set for Monday morning. One that was exponentially larger than the others, involving a new offshore entity with no prior activity. Lucas and Sierra were building towards something bigger than any of the previous exchanges, something that required all their secrecy, something that explained the brown envelope, the late-night meetings, the burner phone, and the paranoia she had seen in Lucas's eyes. She needed leverage, not just evidence, leverage, something that would ensure Lucas couldn't flip the narrative or silence her. And that opportunity arrived sooner than expected when she received an email from an unknown address shortly after sunrise. The subject line was blank. The body contained only one sentence: "You're not the only one he's lying to." Attached was a single audio file. Marin hesitated, but curiosity overpowered caution. She played the recording. Lucas's voice filled the room, low and frustrated, speaking to someone she didn't recognize. He was discussing the upcoming transfer, complaining about Sierra being too demanding and hinting that he planned to phase her out once the money hit the final destination. But the part that made Marin's blood run cold came at the end, when Lucas said he was also waiting for the girl to finally stop asking questions so he could handle her permanently. The recording ended abruptly, but the implication didn't. The girl was her. He wasn't planning to break up with her. He was planning to silence her. That was the moment the last traces of fear inside her evaporated. She understood now that Lucas was more dangerous than she realized, not just a liar or a cheater, but a man who viewed people as obstacles to be managed, removed, or replaced. She forwarded the recording to a secure cloud drive along with every photo she had taken, labeling each folder with dates and context. If Lucas came for her, the evidence would be released automatically. She made sure of it, but she still didn't know who had sent the recording, and she needed to. Later that day, she visited Jonah at his office under the guise of dropping off something for Lucas, knowing Jonah was too anxious to refuse her a private moment. When she confirmed no one was watching, she asked Jonah directly if he had sent the email. His stunned confusion seemed genuine. He swore he had no idea what she was talking about, but when she described the audio content, his expression shifted into a mixture of alarm and guilt. Jonah confessed that Lucas had another associate, someone outside the company, someone even Sierra didn't know about, a man named Ellis Crane. Jonah didn't know much about Ellis except that Lucas had once referred to him as the insurance policy. No one ever met him, but Lucas had been seen whispering into his phone late at night, always pacing, always anxious. Jonah warned her that if Ellis was involved, she needed to be extremely careful, because Ellis was known in certain circles for making problems disappear. Marin left with her heart pounding, but not from fear, from the realization that the email came from someone inside Lucas's scheme who had turned on him. Someone who wanted Lucas to fall. Someone who saw Marin as a necessary part of exposing him. The question was whether Ellis was helping her or watching her. She didn't have the luxury of waiting to find out. That night, she returned to Lucas's apartment one last time, not for evidence this time, but for clarity. She needed to see him, needed to look into the eyes of the man who had pretended to love her while plotting her downfall. She waited in the dark living room until Lucas arrived, drunk on confidence after another meeting with Sierra. When he stepped inside, humming casually, Marin watched as he froze mid-step at the sight of her silhouette. His surprise morphed quickly into irritation, then into a practiced wounded expression. He launched into excuses immediately: work stress, misunderstood situations, Sierra being just a colleague, the usual script he expected her to accept. But Marin didn't respond, and the silence made him nervous. When she finally asked him about Silverline's strategies, his face drained of color. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She asked calm, pointed questions that revealed everything she knew. Lucas attempted to lie, but each lie broke against the evidence she had gathered: the receipts, the account numbers, the burner phone she placed on the table between them, and the recording. When she played it aloud, Lucas went silent, his mask cracking for the first time. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He simply stared at her with a look she had never seen before: cold calculation, the expression of someone reassessing a threat. She realized then that she had been right to prepare safeguards. Lucas wasn't shocked that she found out. He was shocked she wasn't broken. He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if soothing a frightened animal, telling her she didn't understand the greater plan, telling her she wasn't too deep now to walk away. He even reached for her hand with that familiar gentleness that once made her melt. But Marin stepped back. She told him she wasn't afraid of him, and that was when the mask fully dropped. Lucas's face hardened. His voice turned sharp, his posture tense. He warned her that what she had found belonged to people far more dangerous than him. He said Sierra was just the beginning, and that if Marin didn't hand over the evidence, there would be consequences she couldn't imagine. But Marin didn't flinch, because she knew something he didn't: she had already protected herself. When she told him the evidence was backed up and would automatically release if anything happened to her, his confidence faltered. For the first time, she saw genuine fear flicker in his eyes. She walked past him, hand steady on the doorknob, and told him she was done. She didn't look back. As she reached the stairwell, her phone buzzed. Another email from the same unknown sender. This one contained only 3 words. "He's not done." Maureen froze. She realized the real danger wasn't leaving Lucas. The real danger was what Lucas would do now that he knew she wasn't his oblivious shield anymore. And the transfer on Monday was still coming. Whatever Lucas and Sierra were planning would unfold in less than 48 hours. And she had only just begun unraveling the truth. Maureen woke before dawn on Sunday with the heavy certainty that the next 24 hours would determine whether Lucas's scheme collapsed or consumed everyone attached to it. She moved with calculated purpose, gathering everything she had: screenshots, photos, recordings, timelines, and organizing it into a single file she titled the Silverline Operation. She shared it with 4 trusted contacts, including an anonymous tip portal for federal financial crimes. She didn't know whether anyone would act in time, but the transfer scheduled for Monday was too big to ignore, and she wasn't taking chances. As she finalized the last folder, her phone buzzed with a 3rd message from the unknown sender. "He knows about the backups." Her pulse tightened. If Lucas knew, then he also knew she had leverage powerful enough to ruin him. That made her a target in a way she hadn't been before. She spent the morning away from her apartment, staying in crowded public places while she tried to figure out her next move. But around noon she realized she needed answers only one person could give: Sierra. As dangerous as Lucas was, Sierra had just as much to lose if things went wrong, and Maureen suspected Sierra didn't know Lucas planned to cut her out after Monday. She found Sierra's address in a public property record database, a sleek condo in a glass high-rise downtown, and drove there with her heart hammering against her ribs. Sierra answered the door with suspicion that quickly turned into recognition, followed by something Maureen hadn't expected: fear. She invited Maureen inside, glancing nervously down the hallway before closing the door. The apartment was minimalist and stylish, nothing like Lucas's place, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. Maureen didn't waste time. She laid out the folder of printed documents, especially the pages showing Lucas had signed transfers without Sierra's corresponding approval. Sierra stared at the paperwork, her expression shifting from confusion to rage to disbelief. She whispered that Lucas had sworn they were equal partners, that the Monday transfer was going into an account they controlled together. She had no idea he was planning to reroute it into a shell under his sole authority. For several seconds, Sierra paced the room, shaking her head, muttering that she should have known. That Lucas had a way of making himself look trustworthy until the moment he stabbed someone in the back. Sierra finally sank onto the couch, face pale, and told Maureen that the operation wasn't just the 2 of them. It involved a network of clients Lucas had promised financial restructuring options to, which was code for laundering funds through offshore channels. Sierra did the accounting work, but Lucas was the mastermind, the one with corporate access, the one who handled the clients, the one who lied without blinking. She also revealed something that made Maureen's stomach drop. Lucas had recently been warning her about unexpected variables, saying if anything jeopardized the Monday transfer, he would clean the slate. And Sierra suddenly understood she was one of the variables. Lucas intended to disappear after Monday with all the money and let Sierra take the fall. The 2 women sat in silence, enemies by circumstance, allies by necessity. Sierra finally looked up with a steady resolve that surprised Maureen. She said they needed to expose Lucas before he could hurt either of them, and she knew exactly where he would be handling the final transfer: Silverline Strategies' locked back office, a room she had access to only because Lucas once forgot to retrieve his badge after a meeting. Sunday night became a quiet storm. Maureen and Sierra didn't trust each other, but they trusted Lucas even less. They printed evidence, created duplicates of every file, organized timestamps, and coordinated a plan that felt equally desperate and dangerous. By midnight, they were parked outside the Silverline building in Sierra's car, watching the empty lot illuminated by buzzing streetlights. Sierra's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she used Lucas's old keycard to access the building's back entrance. The interior smelled like stale coffee and toner, the type of ordinary office scent that somehow made everything more surreal. They moved quickly through the dark hallways until they reached the restricted suite. Sierra swiped the badge. The light turned green. Inside, the air was colder. Rows of file cabinets lined the walls, and a single desk sat beneath a camera that Sierra quickly disabled. Morin scanned documents while Sierra opened encrypted files on the desktop computer, gathering irrefutable proof that the Monday transfer was scheduled to hit a dummy account under Lucas's control. They were nearly finished when the elevator dinged. The two women froze. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow, deliberate, familiar. Lucas. Sierra mouthed a curse as Morin darted behind the row of filing cabinets while Sierra positioned herself near the desk, pretending she was working alone. Lucas entered the suite moments later, suspicion immediately tightening his features when he saw Sierra. He asked her why she was there, why she had accessed the room on a Sunday night, why she looked nervous. Sierra improvised, claiming she came to double-check numbers before the transfer. Lucas walked closer, smile thin and menacing, and accused her of lying. When he asked whether she had talked to Morin, Sierra held firm, but Lucas's eyes were sharp enough to see the truth behind her hesitation. He lunged toward the desk, searching for evidence. Papers scattered. Sierra pushed back. Lucas grabbed her wrist, and that was when Morin stepped out from behind the cabinets with her phone recording and her voice steady, telling Lucas it was over. He spun toward her with a look that could curdle blood, but Sierra used the moment to shove him away from the desk. Lucas stumbled, knocking over a chair, but he recovered with frightening speed, reaching into his coat. For one breathless second, Morin thought he was pulling a weapon, but instead he grabbed the burner phone and smashed it against the desk, yelling that they didn't understand what they were ruining. Alarms blared through the suite as Sierra triggered the building's silent security system. Lucas froze as the sound vibrated through the floor. Sirens approached from outside. He stared at Morin with pure venom, realizing what she had done, and for a moment she thought he was going to lunge at her. But self-preservation kicked in. He ran. He bolted down the hallway, sprinted to the emergency exit, and disappeared into the night like a cornered animal. By the time police arrived, Morin and Sierra had gathered the remaining files, backed up the computer drive, and provided a full statement filled with documentation that left no room for ambiguity. Federal agents arrived hours later, seizing everything connected to Silverline's strategies. The Monday transfer never happened. By Tuesday, Lucas was rested at a motel an hour outside the city, his car filled with packed bags, forged IDs, and contract drafts implicating Sierra in crimes he planned to pin entirely on her. But the evidence Morin provided told the true story. Sierra was charged for her involvement but received a lenient plea deal for cooperating. Lucas, however, faced a long list of federal charges: fraud, laundering, conspiracy, and none of his charm could save him this time. Morin didn't feel triumphant. She felt free. She moved into a new apartment, blocked Lucas's number, changed her routines, and slowly rebuilt her sense of trust in herself. She refused to let him live in her mind any longer. The unknown sender contacted her one last time. A final message. "You stopped him. That's enough." No name. No explanation. Just closure from someone who had watched Lucas unravel from the inside. Morin deleted the email. She no longer needed the mystery. She had survived the truth. And in doing so, she had taken back her life from a man who pretended to love her, but underestimated the strength she never realized she had until he pushed her to find it.